Hello and welcome to the Armourer with me, Blue, and today I want to show you a in-depth guide of my national Uzuri list. And let's jump right into it, right? This is a contract Uzuri list, and the equipment are pretty standard. We're running Black Tech Whisperers. They allow you to attack multiple times because Assassin doesn't really have go again on their cards. They block for one and you can reuse them a bunch of times because we do play the contracts and we do have silver generation. We do have flick knives that allow us to basically throw nerf scalpel whenever our opponent is about to play a defense reaction in order to just put -1 defense on those defense reactions, effectively turning all their Sink Belows and Fateful Scenes and so on into 3 block cards. I mean, not all, it's obviously usable one time only. Then Mask of Perdition, an incredible equipment in my opinion that allows you to just fatigue your opponents a lot faster, and is also works wonders for your defensive plan because it's incredibly easy to buy back multiple times because you can just use its effect whenever you're hitting with your highest chance hitting contracts and almost guarantee just buying it back every time you use it. Obviously, Spider's Bite is the other main dagger because most decks in the game use attack actions. And finally Tunic. Tunic is the best armor piece for Assassin. You just generate a bunch of resources, you play a slower game, you're going to get like 2, 3, 4 uses out of Tunic throughout the game, and we do have powerful cards to use with that one resource in the deck. And going into the deck, kind of a little bit messy in February, but I guess we'll just start in order. Annihilate the Armed is one of those one resource cards that we can use with Tunic. 5 damage is incredibly hard to block, or at least inconvenient to block for a lot of people because it's not 4, right? Like 4 is a break point, but there's a lot of defense reactions in the game that block for 4. You can use 1 block equipment and a 3 block in order to block 4 as well, but you need like a 2 block equipment or at least 2 cards in order to block 5, which makes it very inconvenient. And also this is probably your best contract in terms of chances to hit and generate silver against almost every deck out there. Then we are obviously running CNC. CNC is one of the best 1-card hands in the game. And it's made even more incredible because with Uzuri and her ability, we can somewhat give this card Dominate, which makes it even stronger. And also this card is amazing in decks that incentivize your opponent to play defense reactions against, and we're most certainly such a deck. Then I'm playing Cut to the Chase. Cut to the Chase is just an amazing attack reaction. It's a 0 for 3, but it also blocks 3, and it also has an effect where it allows us to basically opt our opponent's deck. This ability is kind of useless some of the times, but whenever it becomes useful, it's amazing. A lot of times you will, like for example, attack with Annihilate the Arm, then react with Cut to the Chase. And like put on the bottom there only no attack action or something like this in a fight deck. Like you see Rise from the Ashes, you just put it on the bottom, you then banish an attack, you generate your silver. You can obviously use it on more important contracts like Leave No Witnesses that we'll see later in order to force better on hits. But the idea is that in a lot of matchups you would really like to banish specific cards like Remembrance and so on in matchups and decks that are trying to kind of match your fatigue game plan. And if you manage to snipe their Remembrances or snipe like Bolton's Luminous or something like this with the Cut to the Chase, it's going to be amazing, and it just allows you to do that a little bit more consistently. Then we have Enlightening Strike. And Lightning Strike is amazing because it's just incredibly versatile, right? This is a deck that wants to be blocking a lot of the time, which is why almost all of our cards are going to be at least 3 block, which Lightning Strike is. And then it has the flexibility of becoming a go again card, which we sometimes really need because we are kind of lacking those. It can also become just a 0/4/5 draw card, which is also good because we're playing a bunch of defense reactions as well as a bunch of other cards that are just very good in the arsenal, such as basically all the stealth cards. And it can just be a 0/4/7, which is a very good rate in terms of damage. Then it's Fateful Scene and Seeing Below, the 2 best defense reactions in the game. Incredible on rate, incredible effect. Fateful Scene coupled with Seeing Below to kind of fix the top of your deck and then fix your hand is very powerful. It's fixing your hand because, once again, this deck really thrives on 2 cards. And then again, you can, like, Fateful Scene to scout the top of your deck the turn before you play Codex of Frailty, which is also very good, having a knowledge of what your ponder is going to be, or what it's not going to be at least. Then we have Leave No Witnesses, the contract that every Uzuri deck is playing. It's just amazing, right? It's a 0/4/4 CNC. And it's just amazing of Codex of Frailty. I think there's like nothing more to say about this. Plunder the Poor is another 0/4/4, incredibly just easy to play, good on rate. Similarly to Annihilate the Armed, incredibly high chance of generating silver with this card. Then we have Shakedown, basically the reason why we're playing Uzuri instead of Arachne. It's just an amazing card. Next, I'm playing Slay the Scholars. Some people are trying to play Sack the Shifty here, but I feel like Slay the Scholars just gives me more options to generate silver into more decks, especially things like Wizards. Because into Wizards, you basically have like Slay the Scholars and like Plunder the Poor, but like Plunder the Poor does not hit everything in Wizards because they have not a small amount of 2-cost cards. And against Wizards, you really want to be able to use your boots as much as possible in order to try and aggro them down before they kind of generate their Exodia pieces. Codex of Frailty, just an amazing card, right? It is amazing in Lexi, and it is, I feel, even more amazing in Assassin. I mean, obviously, comparatively, Assassin has less great cards compared to something like Lexi. But this card is insane because it allows you to just go for some insane turns, right? Like you can go for Enlightened Strike for like 5 go again into your dominated Shakedown that you give go again with the boots into then playing Codex of Frailty and attacking with like a Leave No Witness or like a Dead Touch from your arsenal or something like this. Just allows you to go for these insane long turns, and more often than not, actually, it allows you to go for just an incredibly good 1-card hand, right? Like you block for 9 or even 12 during your opponent's turn, and then you just flip Codex of Frailty off of the arsenal. You get a Leave No Witness, you force them to discard the card, you attack with the Leave No Witness, you either consume their arsenal and generate silver, or you make them discard even more cards by blocking the Leave No Witness, and you give them Frailty, and you gain the Ponder. So it's just an insane card. Next, Eradicate. Some people are kind of questioning if Eradicate is good and how good is Eradicate. Eradicate is incredibly good. Eradicate is one of the most threatening contract cards out there. With this deck, fatiguing your opponent is definitely a win condition you can go for. A lot of the times you actually win the game before actually depleting the entirety of their deck, but it's still on the table, and obviously removing a large portion of their deck and removing their threats allows you to kind of win the game naturally, even if you don't aim for like 100% fatigue, right? Especially versus things like Katsu that care for like very specific cards. And if you remove like a Surging Strike and a Whelming Gust Wave or something like this off of the Eradicate, and all of a sudden you're playing against like one less combo line, and it's going to be much harder for him to assemble the combos. So yeah, Eradicate, pretty threatening, right? For a deck that can go to fatigue, for your opponent to allow you to hit an Eradicate even if you don't have any attack reactions like cut to the chase to pump it up. This just shortens the game with one turn, which is everything you need, like everything you want with this assassin list. And thankfully, I mean, not really thankfully, but a lot of people that you play against will kind of know that fact, and that will lead them to just block Eradicate with at least one card every time, right? Like they need to respect the Eradicate. Some people were like, isn't Ponder the Poor just better? I mean, not really, right? Like Ponder the Poor, they can just allow it to hit and it's going to banish one card. If they allow this to hit, it's going to banish 3 cards. So they will 100% block Eradicate, but they can afford to not block Plunder the Poor. So yeah, it's just great. Into some fatigue versus fatigue matchups, you can try and go for Eradicate pitch stacks, where you pitch stack your Eradicate alongside a Cut to the Chase or Q and some Shreds in order to make it incredibly hard to block and get rid of like 6, 7, 5 cards from your opponent's deck. Then I'm running the Isolates. I'm running only 6 Isolates. I'm not running that many swap-in targets in my deck. It's mainly like Shakedown and Command and Conquer, which means I don't really need the Red Isolate. And then some Shreds. The yellow Shred is just amazing in my opinion. It can pitch for the Dagger, as well as like all of your swap cards like CNC and so on, you know. And then it's on red, right? It gives -3. It can destroy temper equipment, which is something we're seeing even more of in today's Flesh and Blood landscape, right? LSS is printing even more and more temper cards, and being able to just destroy them if your opponent commits to the block is nice. The reasoning behind Blue Shred is that it's just a good blue card, right? I wanted to have some more defense reactions because a lot of times your opponent will block cleanly, and I mean a lot of times the blues you will be pitching, but when it cycles back to the end game, still having access to some defense, to some attack reactions is pretty nice. Then I'm running Backstab and Wither as some additional stealths. In the main deck we do not have that many swaps, we only have 9 swaps and 12 stealths, but in the side deck you'll see we introduce a little bit more swap targets, and I wanted to have stealths for them in the main deck. The reason behind Backstab is because against defense reaction decks like Fatigue, Bravo, and some other lists, you can go for Backstab, switch into CNC, and just never allow them to play their defense reaction from Arsenal. A lot of times when you do this play, they'll just block 6 on the Backstab, because these decks that are going to be running defense reactions against you will want to block anyway. But that's where you can punish them with a Shred, right? You go Backstab, they go block for 6, you go Shred, into then swap in the CNC, hitting them for 3, and removing their arsenal and just punishing them greatly. Surgical extraction, obviously the most impactful contract in terms of just the effect. You look at your opponent's hand and you just pick a card and remove it. You know, this is even better than Shakedown. But unfortunately, obviously it costs 2 and it's only 4 damage and so on, but it's just incredible if you manage to get it in with an Isolator, just like any swap, alongside like a Shred or a Cut to the Chase, because a lot of times people will just block 6 and you say, psych, it's 7 now. And Wither I like the most out of all the other Shreds, simply because Frailty is just good, right? Like, Frailty is good against Assassins because it stops the daggers, at least. It's good against Ninja because both Fire and Cats were now running Kodachis, and it's good against Lexi and Azalea, obviously, so it's just overall good. And then in the sideboard, I'm coming in with 3 Death Touches, 2 Frailty Traps, 2 Humbles, 3 Heroes, 2 Oasis Respite, 1 Remembrance, 3 Arcane Barrier, and 1 Orbit to Cast. And I'm going to explain these choices in kind of the matchup spread, the matchup guide in a way. So against Azalea, what I'm adding in to the deck is basically more defense. Right, I'm adding the 2 Frailty Traps and the 2 Oases. So this gives me like 8 defense reactions and 2 Oases, which is 10 defensive cards, which should be enough to kind of stop her dominated turns whenever she has them. It's practically the same against Bravo, right? The difference is that against Bravo I will go for a Remembrance, because the defensiveness of Bravo kind of varies, right? You never know how much defense and how many cards the Bravo opponent is going to bring. I mean, if they come in with lean 60, you obviously do not need the Remembrance, but if they come in with like 70 cards or something like this, you may need the Remembrance. How do you play those matchups, both the Bravo and the Azalea one? They're kind of similar. The Bravo one is a little bit more nuanced, and it's a push and pull between what both of you want to achieve. But the biggest tip I can give is basically do not use your armor pieces to block on-hit effects that do not just shut you down, right? If my opponent is coming in with a Spinal Crush, dominated Spinal Crush, I don't really care about that effect, right? I don't care that I won't be able to go for like E-Strike with Go Again. I don't care that I won't be able to go with the Dagger. I'm just going to present another attack. The contracts by themselves are very threatening in those matchups because they deal solid amount of damage, right? They are good on rate, they are 0 for 4, but they also get rid of a card from your opponent's deck, which is very crucial, because in Flesh and Blood, usually one of the ways defensive decks win and mill you out is because they can use their life as a resource in order to absorb cards in a way, and they can't really do that against contracts. So yeah, just save your equipment for the very last moment, for the very, very important on-hit effects, right? For example, if Azalea comes in with her arrow that only gives you 1 action, you don't really care. But if she comes in with an arrow that has like triple blood rot on top of it, right? You may care a lot more about that. You may care a lot more about Crippling Crush because it discards cards at random. There are a bunch of times where against Bravo you won't even care about their Sunder hitting because your deck excels off of playing 2 cards anyway. And Tier Uzuri is not amazing on hit rate, right? It's 3 cards for 7 if they're playing a Notus. So you can kind of match that with 2 cards. Anyway. So yeah, save your armor for the important on-hits and save your defense reactions for the important on-hits. This is probably the best advice I can give, is keep a defense reaction in your arsenal or whenever they take damage in order to try and execute this big punishing dominate turn, and then just stop it with your defense reactions. Versus Azalea, when they go for like 13 dominate and so on, you won't be able to quite stop it, but you're going to be able to absorb a lot of that damage. And versus Bravo, they'll usually go for a dominated crippling crush, and you can quite easily stop by playing a 0/4/4 from Arsenal, plus a 3 block from hand, plus one of your 1 block equipment, which you have 3 of, so you can do that 3 times throughout the game, and they have 3 crippling crushes. So yeah, and when you do that, you usually win out on tempo. And Was is obviously, you can use it off of Tunic, and it's not even a defense reaction, so it's just amazing. Next, we talked about Kano and Icelander. I'm bringing in triple Arcane Barrier and an Orbital Blast as the only dagger that we have. Daggers are not amazing damage-wise, and I'd much rather keep my boots, tunic, and mask against those heroes instead of like double daggers and playing, like the mask goes down. So basically, the idea is we do run quite a few blues in our deck. We run 15 blues. It's not amazingly high, but it's decently high. And being able to deny some of Kano's effects by blocking 3 and forcing him to have to spend the extra resource to pump them to 4 in order to get the effect, as well as being able to stop Icelander's blue ice veins. It's also very relevant. And just 3 Arcane Barrier has allowed me to fatigue some Icelanders that I didn't manage to just kill. But usually you just want to kill them. The changes we're making to the deck is we're adding 1 Remembrance. We're adding Remembrance mostly because we're taking out a red card instead of it. And we're adding in Hurls and Death Touches. What we're removing is basically the defense reactions, right? We're removing basically all the defense reactions. Especially against Kano, right? Against Kano, defense reactions achieve absolutely nothing. Heroes, I'm lacking heroes here and not against Bravo, because Bravo wants to be blocking anyway, so he doesn't really have a problem by just putting a 3 block in front of the hero, and it essentially does nothing. But if he is on the crackback and I want to block, now the hero is only a 2 block, so it's kind of hurting me in that way. At least that's my logic behind it. But against Icelander and Kano, these decks also want to block, but they still want to keep like 2 card hands, 3 card hands, and so on. You know, like keeping a 1 card hand in those decks means I'm just getting a free turn next again. Where against Bravo, he's just going to pitch that card and attack me with a hammer for 4 again, and I can't infinitely take those. So yeah, like stripping the hands of those decks, in my opinion, is like way more valuable, which is why we're coming in with the Death Touch as well. It's just damage, right? It's just very efficient damage, and I'm keeping the CNCs. The reason why I'm keeping the CNCs isn't even again Icelander is because Icelanders will have these turns where they will arsenal a non-blue card just because that's how their hands go. And if we catch them in that instance with like a dominated CNC or something like this, we can get a lot of advantage. You know, we can get very far ahead in that situation. And obviously Orbital Blast is coming in here because these decks are not running attack actions, and even Icelander that is running attack actions, those attack actions are blocking for 2 anyway, and she doesn't really want to use them for blocks, so it's just better to limit her other block options, in my opinion. Next we get to Pistol Dash, another very tough matchup for Uzuri, and yet another matchup where we're going for Hero Death Touch, because once again we really want to limit her hand size. The reason being that it gives us more time to rack up these like dagger hits, gives us more time to get into our, you know, like more important cards. And once again, Dash is still a deck that wants to block, but she still wants to play out her items, and whenever she wants to play those items, she still needs to keep like 2 cards, sometimes maybe even 3 cards if they have like the item searcher. And if we force them out of any of those plays and slow them down by an additional turn, it's just pluses, right? Where Bravo, once again, in my opinion, he just, sure, I'm going to block and then attack you with the weapon again, right? Like he's able to just progress his game plan with even 1 card, and those decks are not able to do that. And that's it. Basically removing the defense reactions again, but keeping Frailty. The reason why we're keeping Frailty is because once they amass their items, Frailty is going to be blocking like 6 in those turns where they attack with the pistol 3 times. So that's pretty valuable, right? It can give us enough time to actually kill them with some dominated attacks. What's left is Ninja and Dromai. So Ninja and Lexi are practically the same. The core of our deck, or at least of my deck, is like 57 cards. So I'm just plugging in the 2 frailties that are great against both of those decks, and 1 Death Touch. And the 1 Death Touch can technically give them frailty again. And that's about it, right? Like against those decks, once again, you want to just play a value game. Unlike the Blue Uzuri lists, this deck is not afraid of like excessively blocking and just keeping 1 card hands, because like 1 card hand contracts are just great, right? They're going to lower your opponent's threat count in the deck. They're going to give you silver. Silver is going to give you even more blocking options. 4 damage for 1 card is just very nice. It's just good, right? It's just good. There are games where you will just block with your shakedowns, right? Because you do not need them to win. You can win off of the contracts alone, and the shakedowns are there to just help you win even more whenever your opponent allows you a breathing space to do so. I guess I have Durintia. Durintia, you swap the Spider's Bite for an Orbital Blast again, and you just put in all the defense reactions, right? You just want to stifle their sword. You don't want to allow them to get counters, and if you allow them to get counters, you want to be able to remove them later. So yeah, we are once again on the 10 defense reaction package, and that's pretty much it for that matchup. Now, something that I want to talk about is Scale Peeler. A lot of people like Scale Peeler. I do not like Scale Peeler. The reason why I do not like it is because, once again, the deck is really trying to play off of one card a lot of the time because of the contracts. Keeping a second card in order to go for a scale pillar contract is not that amazing, and it's not going to be that hard for your opponents to force you off of like keeping a second card. And even if they don't, you're going to have turns where you're just going to go for isolate into a shakedown or something like this, and during those times they can just utilize their armor, therefore making your future scale pillars worse. And once again, this deck is playing a long game, so you kind of want to stay consistently good throughout the game. That's my take on it. There's a difference between Big Dragon Dromai and Red Line Dromai. A lot less people have been playing Red Line Dromai as of recently, but that's always subject to change, right? It's kind of like very player dependent. Once again, we're coming in with the Orbital Blast instead of Spider's Bite because they play a lot of dragons. The dragons have 3 block non-attack actions. And here you will notice that against Red Line, I'm not playing a lot of poppers, right? Like, these poppers are just left in my sideboard, and instead I'm playing defense reactions and hurls. In fact, like, the hurl is the only thing that I'm putting in here. The reason for that is because Red Line Dromai, for me at least, just plays like a regular aggro deck, and I can just block it out, send the 0/4 contracts, crack my mask to just banish 2 every time, rebuy the mask and continue doing so over and over again. And I can just stifle their aggression by just blocking 3, right? Like, a lot of the dragons, especially Red Line Dromai dragons, are just going to be attacking for 3 as normal attacks, and I can just block 3 and then just clear them out, right? And they're definitely going to have a turn where they're just not going to present a dragon. Or they're going to present a dragon that's going to die to, like, dagger hits or something like this, right? Because with a tunic and a blue, I can just pitch them and use 2 daggers to clear like 2 Ashwings, or like clear a 2 health dragon or something like this, and the contracts are amazing in clearing the 4 health dragons for just 1 card. This is exactly why Hero is here, right? Hero allows me to just kill 2 dragons a turn, or kill a dragon if they only have 1, and then present something like Plunder the Poor or Annihilate the Armed. And yeah, overall, to me, it's a relatively straightforward aggro matchup, where you should not allow them to stack dragons, because they play very few dragons. They do not play a lot of Remembrance. Even if they play Remembrance, you hitting them with your contracts is going to be a lot more guaranteed compared to other Dromai lists, because they're going to be playing a lot of 2 blocks, and they're not going to be on something like 10 defense reactions package or something like this. So yeah, I'm playing it just as a normal fatigue strategy, where I just side in Hero in order to clear the board whenever they take a turn to place like 2 or 3 dragons, and that's it. It's been like a relatively easy matchup for me. Now, Big Dragon Dromai, on the other hand, a lot harder matchup. Because they're running a lot more defenses, they're running a lot more 3 blocks, and they're running a lot bigger dragons. And now bigger dragons do not simply die to contracts. And in those matchups, I'm coming in with like all the poppers I have. I'm coming in with the Remembrance. I'm still keeping the hurls. And this is the matchup where I decided to play Humble. Once upon a time I was playing Down and Dirty because it was more versatile as a blocker, as a popper, but I decided, it's not just I, right? Like, I believe the community, the Uzuri community sentiment overall is, if you can, just go for a race game against those type of Dromais, right? Just try to constantly threaten as much damage as possible, and Humble is one of those cards that I can threaten damage with, and then kind of guarantee that on the crackback they're going to do absolutely nothing, giving me a free turn of trying to do damage to them again. That's basically it. At Nationals, I played one game where this did not work as intended, right? Like, I didn't manage to be that aggressive, and we ended up going to time because I had to kind of pivot into a fatigue strategy. But my second game against the Big Dromai, this strat worked perfectly as intended, because I won the game with like 27 health to 0 or something like this, right? It was just insane, because things like Leave No Witness, Plunder the Poor, even like Slay the Scores have a relatively high chance of hitting. And if you get into this kind of like cycle of hitting them a bunch and like rebuying your Black Deck Whisperers again and again, it's very good, right? That's kind of how you win. And that's about it. The main takeaways are, play this as a defensive deck. Do not try to be greedy and take damage in order to send mediocre attacks, right? Because your amazing turns are like only 13 damage, right? Which is a bad Briar turn, or like the worst Lexi turn. Instead, try to just outvalue your opponent by blocking out all their important on hits, and then threatening them with like 1 and 2 card hands, and then just outvalue them through the silver generation, through just removing their threats, and like later in the game they're going to start having worse and worse turns, while yours are going to continue to be the same, which are just present a contract and smile. So yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them in the comments. And I should also have a gameplay video against a Fatigue Bravo. So yeah, bye bye.